Welcome to the Band Room Podcast. My name is Dylan Maddox.
And I'm Cait Nishimura.
Cait, is that really you?
It's really me.
Wow. I couldn't tell if it was you or Caitlin Bove. Yes, Cait is back with us. Cait with a C is back.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you, Caitlin, for filling in.
How was your time in Vancouver?
It was good. Actually, I wasn't in Vancouver. I was in Victoria, BC.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. And it was wonderful. I had an amazing, truly life-changing experience. And unfortunately, I got COVID while I was there. Mm-hmm. And so that has been no fun. I'm almost feeling better, I think. But anyway, some lingering symptoms and stuff. So hopefully that will clear up soon. But yeah, listeners / viewers, you will see and hear evidence of this in this episode. But anyway, I'm very happy to be back. How are you, Dylan? Yeah,
I'm pretty good. You know, we just had we did 2 off-campus concerts back to back, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah,
both of which I did 2 of your pieces, Wilderness, and then we did the American premiere of Echoes of a Northern Lake last night, which was beautiful. And band directors came up to me asking when the piece was available. Aww. So I just texted you and I said, we did our job.
Yeah,
no, but
it
really meant the world to me. And we gave the world premiere of E.K.R. Hamill's Stardust Dunes with the Moon and Gold
that's
Band.
awesome.
And that's, I mean, I knew it was a good piece, but I think hearing it in not MIDI form now, it's like, oh, this is a great piece. So I can't wait to share that recording later with the world. But what I was going to say is it just means the world to me whenever I can share music I love by people I love with people here. It's been really fantastic. So that's been great. I got a new piece of equipment that I want to do a little bit of a show and tell.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
Because I'm a bit of I didn't think I would be like this when the podcast started, but I love like podcast gear. I just love it. So once again, not sponsored by them. Although if you're watching on video, you can see their logo right there. I got the new Rode Procaster 2, which is like it's a soundboard, and it's got lots of things. It's specifically built for podcasting, but it has all of these cool I'll put cool in quotation marks effects that you can do. So here's one of them. Just listen. My voice is already kind of low, but check this out. Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Pantry Room Podcast.
That's kind of terrifying.
Anyway, yeah, so that's one of them. It's pretty crazy. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum,
this one goes a little high. And it's weird hearing my own voice and then hearing how it's affected because it's a different pitch. So I can't sing. Like, I really couldn't sing anything. Anyway.
Oh, petition to do the entire intro in helium voice.
And then very quickly, there's some other ones. What do we got? That one's got, there's a monster one. Oh, it's the same. Anyway. I guess
it sounds like the other one.
Same as yeah. This is one of my favorites, though. Oh, wait. There we go. I am a robot. And then one that we've referenced in the episode, or in the bonus episode, rather, is a button that we've actually should have had for some past guests.
Yeah.
Like I'll just tell you about how my week was. So anyway, so now I got the censor button, which I can use it for myself at least.
I was going to say, I don't know if you could really catch it in time. Yeah, if somebody else. would you be able to tell if someone was ramping up to being able to say something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, so I'm like really excited for this. We're going to be able to use it because. And I also realized the reason I said Vancouver is because we have some news to share.
Vancouver
with all
on the
of
brain.
You.
Yeah.
Cait and I were invited to present at the British Columbia Music Educators Association Conference, which is just around the corner, happening in a couple of weeks. And we're really excited to be going to Vancouver. I guess it's going to be October 20th to the 22nd that we'll be there, presenting 2 workshops. One is not really a workshop so much that, but it's going to be our first official band room live, like actually live, which is very exciting. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Stephen Capaldo from the University of Victoria as our guest for that. So that's going to be exciting. So you don't have to be there to hear it. It's going to be recorded and you'll hear it in its entirety. And it'll just be that conversation we had, none of the fancy kind of intros and stuff that we usually give. So, but anyway, so we're doing that and it's going to be a lot of fun. And then Cait and I are co-presenting a workshop called Composer, Conductor and Community, creating a healthy musical ecosystem through commissioning. So we're just going to be talking about the collaborative process, which we've kind of gone through a little bit this past week with Echoes. So we're just going to talk about how that not only benefits, your band, but it also just the relationship that the composer and conductor have, not to mention the community that gets to benefit from that music being made as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. And it'll be great to catch up with people we know. And I know there's some people who listen to the podcast. That's why we got invited. So to connect with all of them will be awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there's anyone listening who will be at the conference, definitely come and say hi, come to our sessions and introduce yourselves. And I'm sure there might be some people who have played my music and will want to say hello, and I certainly welcome that as well. So that'll be really fun. And recording a podcast live with like a live audience, I think, because it's one thing to do live on Facebook Live or like something like that, but to actually be like live in the room, in person with each other, with the guest, with an audience, that's going to be a new thing for us. So very excited to have that opportunity. Should be a lot of fun.
I was checking my soundboard to see if I had like a laugh track. I was like, oh, I wouldn't even need it.
Yeah, or like applause or like.
I do, but I can't get it to work. Let's see.
Well, you've got a couple weeks.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Anyway. So that's what's coming up into the future. But there's the present to talk about. Yep. And we just had a great conversation with Gareth Jones, and he is the director of the University of Calgary Wind Ensemble and Symphonic Band. He teaches conducting there and conducts the brass choir as well, in which he also founded, and does many other things there. We talked about not only his time at the university, but his time as associate principal trumpet of the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra and the Tulsa Philharmonic. So just it was great to once again kind of have this performer educator talk again. But it was so I guess reinforcing and refreshing to hear him speak about how his time as a professional musician influences him as a teacher. And the answers he gave, I'm not going to give anything away, but are just not what I was kind of expecting. Yeah. And talking about kind of people first concepts and things like that. So it was just a really great conversation.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, left feeling inspired and reflective and all the things that you want after a good podcast. So I think everyone will enjoy it. And before we get to that, I'll just invite everybody to leave us a rating and or a review on whatever podcast platform you use to listen to this podcast and all the other things you listen to. It takes very little time and it helps us a lot. So please take a second to do that. Make sure you've subscribed to the Band Room Podcast. Give us a like, a follow on social media and all that jazz. If you would like to leave us a comment or send us a message, that goes a long way as well, just to give us some feedback and let us know what about this you're enjoying or what you want to hear more of and that kind of thing. And I think we did actually get a message recently that Dylan shared with me that was, really, really wonderful. I don't know if we want to read that out or if we can do that.
Oh, I can do it. It can be our review of the month.
I'm going to write a jingle for that.
But that's okay. Yeah, we should. So yeah, I don't often, actually, I don't really ever share the name of the person, so that's okay. But here's just a quick note. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you two hosts and your guests for this podcast. This podcast was so affirming for all the values I hold as a future educator. The experiences you talked about resonated with me immensely, and I appreciate the time you took to share this content with us. Dylan, you mentioned sobbing on your way to work after listening to Kenley's podcast. Very familiar experience happening over here. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for that little note you sent us. I really appreciate that.
That's awesome. See, that's how easy it is, folks. Send us something, tell us something. It really does make our day. And leaving a review and all that, it helps other people find the podcast too. So thank you for helping us out in that way. And if you want to help us out in another way, there's something else that you could do.
Cha-ching! You could become a patron of the Bandroom Podcast by supporting us through Patreon, where you'll have access to bonus episodes, stickers, and other things.
Like this sweater. Well, that's not through Patreon.
Like that's,
sorry.
you have to pay for that.
Just buy it if you want it. But people who are watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm modeling our very spiffy Bandroom Podcast merch. And for those of you who can't see it, well...
and it's good. It's great quality.
You have to buy some for yourself. It's very cozy.
I would do it. I have to wait a couple more months before I can put on a hoodie here, but I'll get there. I'll get there. So we can listen to the bonus episode that we recorded today with Gareth. It was a good one. With someone who's, he spent 10 years with the Calgary Philharmonic. He still plays with them now from time to time, but I guess kind of the theme of the episode was just, always make sure you're prepared and before you leave home, make sure you have everything that might be necessary to, I don't know, play Scheherazade.
Yeah, probably important.
So you can hear that bonus episode and many more by checking out patreon.com/bandroompod. That's patreon.com/bandroompod for more. But without further ado, here is our conversation with Gareth Jones. Here we are for another exciting Bandroom podcast. And today I'm really excited because I didn't tell him this before we got on the call, but he is someone I've looked up to for a long time, that I've, as a young person at Music Fest Canada, I would see him walking around. I said, who is that person with that great head of hair? And it was Gareth Jones, who is, he conducts the University of Calgary Wind Ensemble, artistic director of the Alberta Winds, and many, many more things. So welcome to the Bandroom, Gareth.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that this worked out, and that he's even fitting this in like right before rehearsal for us. So we're extra appreciative for you to be here. But I guess we'll just start where we always start. Where, why, and how did your musical journey begin?
Do you want? There's the very long version. There's the slightly edited version. There's. I was an odd young child that when I was asked when I was my friends would ask me when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and we'd kind of going, what are you going to be when you grow up? And my stock answer was I was going to be first chair of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. I grew up in Vancouver. Oh. And they're all looking at me going, why do you want to be a piece of furniture? And
first chair.
And nobody quite got the first chair thing, but so it was. And I had it in my head from very early on that I was going to be a musician, and I started out as a violinist for many years, and started playing trumpet in high school, and after many conductors asking me, "Have you ever considered viola?" Which is code for you're not a very good violinist.
Sorry to any viola players who are listening.
Yeah. Well, if you're starting on it, actually, there's no way to back out of that one. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean that. My sister's a violist, so.
Oh, okay.
Not that makes it any better. I don't know why that but so I realized trumpet was a better fit for me, went into the wonderful world of brass playing, and had some, went to UBC and met the wonderful trumpet teacher and pedagogue, Vincent Cichowicz, when I was playing in the National Youth Orchestra. Decided I really had to go out and follow him. I transferred out to Northwestern and finished my undergrad there. And it was a wonderful couple of years there. I actually got to work with John Painter a lot there.
Oh, great.
And so there's really wonderful experiences out there. I was fortunate enough to get a gig out of university, playing with the Tulsa Philharmonic, which sadly is no more. Yeah, but played with them for 2 years, and then I got the job playing second trumpet with the Calgary Philharmonic. And what got me into conducting and that whole end of things was actually an injury. It was right around 20 years ago now, after I'd been playing in the orchestra for 10 years. I tore a muscle in my lip, my orbicularis oris. Yeah. Try explaining that one to the disability insurance people. They're going, you tore your lips. What? And so after a bunch of years of trying to rehab it, retore it, had a surgery. In the meantime, I got into conducting, first of all, out of kind of desperation. How can I stay in the music world? And I found that I was shocked how much I loved it. And it was interesting for me that what opened up, I was really planning more towards orchestral conducting because that's the world I mainly knew.
Right.
And what opened up through a series of very fortuitous circumstances was some wind band conducting at the University of Calgary. And it was fascinating for me because I was really, as much as I loved playing trumpet in an orchestra, there was always something missing for me. And what I realized the main thing that was missing was that connection to people, being able to make, when you're performing, you impact people's lives, but kind of from afar. As a teacher and a conductor, it's immediate, it's right there. And I love what I get to do as far as working with students and musically, but just hopefully making a difference in their lives. And that, to me, I'm fortunate enough to be back on playing the trumpet. I've been back with that for 10 or 12 years now. And I feel like I've got best of all worlds, where I'm able to have a foot in both of those worlds while being the main part of what I do now is at the university, and it is just such a treat and a privilege to be able to be a daily part of the students' lives and really make an impact. So there's a very long-winded answer to a very simple question.
No, that's pretty good.
That's a great
Pretty
answer.
concise, actually.
And now, a word from our sponsor. The Band Room Podcast is proudly supported by Kaleidoscope Adventures. Kaleidoscope Adventures is a full-service student trip planner with more than 26 years of inspiring student travel.
Dylan and I have had positive experiences on school music trips, so we both know how much these meaningful opportunities contribute to students' musical development and create lasting memories.
Kaleidoscope Adventures specializes in organizing unique trips to over 40 student-friendly destinations.
If you're planning a student trip, you can count on the Kaleidoscope Adventures professionals to collaborate with you to organize the perfect education or performance tour.
When you're ready to plan your next adventure, visit kaleidoscopeadventures.com. That's kaleidoscopeadventures.com. And I can't even, I wouldn't even be able to fathom that feeling, or that just the thought of not being able to, do the thing that you do, and having to pivot like that. And it's not the first time we've talked about this exact thing on the podcast. Nicole Puno, who's a composer, same thing. She was doing her doctorate in trumpet.
Also a trumpet
I think
player
at
too.
one of the Michigans. And I know Ray Tizard also is an example of that same thing in Toronto. But it's always interesting that that musical basis for what you do as a trumpet player, as just a performing musician, sometimes we question it, and maybe it's not enough for to be a conductor, but it always guides everything. Because I was in Jason Kassler's office the other day. I was like, do you know Gareth well? And he was asking me, he's a master musician and like a wonderful person and conductor. So it's awesome to hear how that musicianship guides into your conducting, which we're going to talk about more later. But did you have like musical parents? What kind of child goes?
I was going to ask that. Yeah, I was wondering that too. I love that we got to this part of your journey, but like rewinding a whole bunch, like what prompts a 5-year-old to say, I want to be like first chair Vancouver Symphony, like, as you said,
Mozart
your
in
peers,
the womb or something.
Yeah, like your peers are like, chair, what do you mean? Like, and you're already, what that is, what that role is, and you want to do it. Like, where did that inspiration come from for you?
My mom was actually her undergrad was in music, and she was actually intending to go into music therapy, which for the time was quite ahead of the curve. Yeah. So I grew up the most. Now here's one of the many things that will date me, that the most memorable LP cover that I remember from my childhood is this. I forget the artist, but it was quite an abstract painting on the cover of this Darius Milhaud album, and that's a lot of kids are listening to Fred Penner and all this wonderful. I'm getting warped by Darius Milhaud. So I never really stood a chance.
Right.
Actually, it's quite funny, because both of my girls, I've got 2 daughters, and they've both gone into music themselves.
Nice.
And so so there's multiple generations that never stood a chance.
Oh. There we go. The mystery was solved.
Yeah,
That would have been really cool, though, if you were just like, I just came into my head and that's what I wanted to do. And the other thing I want to talk about, because we've had numerous guests on the podcast who have been Northwestern graduates and have also been Cichowicz students, Gillian MacKay being one of them. Yeah. Who else? Actually, someone else in Alberta, Karen Guffelson.
Right.
Also. Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, what is it about Cichowicz that kind of maybe influences your teaching as a conductor?
Yeah. He, in his teaching, it was, he taught the person, not the instrument. It was, and I think any great teacher does that. Any great teacher is truly interested in caring about the individual and how they can help them in a positive direction. But he really made that connection between music making and the person. That one of his things is you will always play your personality. That's just how you are, and how we are comes through in our playing. And it's interesting for me, conducting a large ensemble, that it's the absolutely crucial component of creating room and creating space for that collection of personalities to come through in the music, which I find that a really intriguing challenge, where it's not about, for me, it's not about that, okay, can you create the most technically perfect recording or performance, but can you create something that really reflects the players and says something unique? And to me, that very much came from my time with Cichowicz and understanding the importance of that. I can remember I had huge problems with nerves early on, and when I first transferred out to Northwestern, I was playing a master class, and it was after I'd been there for 2 weeks, and I'd been wandering around listening to all the practice rooms and going and trying to get things right in my practice room, and it just, I felt like there was Bud Herseth behind every one of these practice room doors, and I was just going, what am I? And then I go to play at this master class, and Cichowicz was there. I believe Frank Crisafulli was there, the old principal trombone in Chicago. I believe Arnold Jacobs was there, and I'm just going, are you serious? I'm playing in front of
people.
Yeah, and I was a wreck. By the time I got to the end of my performance of my simple little piece, I could hardly make a sound on the instrument. And I went to Cichowicz the next day and just went, you know what? It's clear I don't belong here. I like this. I've figured out how to make this work. I'm gonna book a flight, head home. Like and he took me aside, sat me down, and just said, okay, it's that vulnerability. It's that you see as this big weakness right now that is going to be a strength. And it was a very interesting journey, kind of figuring out the nerves and getting through that, but understanding how they were kind of a strength in disguise was a colossal help. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that is also the best explanation of Cichowicz, like just teaching that I've heard, and it's so beautiful to hear how he was kind of a people first teacher, and how that inspired you. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
You mentioned a little bit as you were talking about your musical journey that right out of school you got a job with the Tulsa Philharmonic, which unfortunately is no longer, but still, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience in that gig and also with the Calgary Philharmonic. And now that you've contextualized this as well, knowing about the injury and how that led to kind of what came next for you. Yeah, I understand that, like, oh, okay, so that was a shorter chapter and then you kind of went on to do some conducting, and it's helpful to know like where that came from. But yeah, I would still love to know about your experiences playing in those orchestras, and maybe even how you got from, as you were just talking about being so nervous and performance anxiety and all of that, to then like performing regularly with these professional ensembles. How was that for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my time in Tulsa, that first gig, I'll never forget sitting in my first concert, playing with the orchestra, sitting there on stage, looking out at the audience, and I'm just kind of going, I'm making a living at this. This isn't this is a career, and it was a shocking moment for me, and it was actually, I think it was a colossal relief moment for my dad. He was very. I'll never forget the first time he and my mom came down to hear a concert down in Tulsa, and that look of very poorly hidden relief on his face when he sees me in this professional situation after playing all these pickup gigs with R&B bands and all of this kind of
right.
He was very relieved. But having that experience in Tulsa, it was a steep learning curve for me, and I think everybody stepping into their first full-time orchestral gig, it's a steep learning curve. And actually, my older daughter has just started. She's a bass player, and she's just started playing with Symphony Nova Scotia.
Oh,
And yeah, and she was looking at this first concert, this sampler concert where there's Beethoven 5 and Nutcracker and all these kind of. For me, having played in orchestras forever, it's like, oh, okay, so it's just like a falling off a log concert. It's a piece of cake. And she's going, no, I've never played these with a group before. And that's one of the things I'm thinking, okay, wait a second. We need to create a course that's or professional orchestra 101, making sure that every orchestra student, every instrumental student knows the standard rep. I think, and it's interesting, I think as conductors, it's so easy to be guilty of trying to find new, interesting stuff, which is great. Mm-hmm. But I think especially in the orchestral world, it's important to have that foundation of the knowledge of the standards. Yeah. So from Tulsa, moving on to Calgary, and it was it was interesting for me going through that steep learning curve that Tulsa was into Calgary, where I felt more kind of felt like I belonged more. Mm-hmm. Felt a little more confident in myself in that setting. Right. And then and for me, being in Calgary, it was close to Vancouver where I grew up, so it was just kind of a little more familiar territory too. But it was very interesting throughout that whole process, working through the nerve stuff that I talked about. Actually, even in preparation for the Calgary audition, I started working with it's called an Ericksonian therapist, where it's just a very intensive imaging, really, where you're just trying to dream through your audition or whatever you're preparing for. And that was fascinating for me. It's interesting what we do in our own minds. I used to be a competitive tennis player, and I would work with a sports psychologist. When I first started working with him, I could not win a point in my head, and I just going, okay, I'm starting to see the issue here. Right. And it was the same kind of thing with starting to do that work with my trumpet playing, that it was understanding that I wouldn't go so far as self-sabotage, but just understanding that it can come from just a lack of truly believing what's there and letting go and trusting it. And so that's a big part of what made the Calgary audition possible for me. And really, it's my time, and I still play with the Calgary Philharmonic, but it's on a part-time basis. But being there, like the time when I was there as a full-time musician, it was not just kind of stepping into the world of being a professional musician, but colossal changes in my life of becoming a father and all of becoming a homeowner and all. And I'm like looking around going, I'm an adult. And it was kind of shocking to me at the time. And it's the orchestra and the trumpet playing and the music was all kind of a part of that. And when I stepped into, because throughout all that time, as the vast majority of musicians do, I taught privately and found that I learned so much about myself and my music making through that. And then when I stepped into when I had the injury and started getting into conducting and stepped into the more full-time teaching role, it's that eye-opening experience of the self-understanding and the the humbling experience of the self-understanding and self-awareness, which was absolutely wonderful. And same thing, because that, as I say, it was my injury that got me into the more full-time teaching and the conducting end of things. And it was the understanding that so much of it is this self-inflicted, when we've got conflicts in ourselves, to me, our body brings that out, and it'll come out one way or another. And I'm just thankful that it came out in this little way that affected that part of my life, but nothing else. And now that that's back, it's kind of, as I say, best of all worlds. But it's over those years with the orchestras, it was just a lot of growing, a lot of learning more about music making, and most of all, learning more about myself. And it's something that hugely impacts and shapes how I teach and how I conduct.
Right. No, that's beautiful. And I love hearing about, and because since our audience it's actually more American now than it is Canadian.
Right.
The Calgary Philharmonic is one of Canada's top orchestras, and one of the greatest promoters of new music as well, and does a lot of things to just bring very high artistic performances to our country. So it's really nice to hear about it and how that's influenced you. And I can only imagine all the conductors that you were able to play under, and all those great musicians that you get surrounded by. And it's fun because when my friend Miranda is now and then in the Philharmonic, we used to play in the Weston Silver Band together.
Oh, okay, very cool. Yeah,
so small world.
Miranda sounded like $1 million. She is just it's so great to have her in there.
And well, you segued into this next question beautifully for us. But I'm always interested in speaking to people like you, because I have a similar not a bathroom, oh my goodness, background to getting into conducting in a similar path, being a professional trumpet player. And I find more and more that's not probably the most common path that people take to be a performer, then go into education. But I'm wondering how Gareth the performer influences Gareth the conductor and educator.
Yeah. I find, and this is where I love going back, being able to go back in and play on a regular basis with the orchestra. I find it's so easy to it's so easy to forget how much all of the students in my ensembles are putting themselves on the line, how scary it is. And I find getting in there on a regular basis and being on the other side of the baton, I learn a lot constantly. First of all, about just keeping that perspective, but also of wonderful things to do and some things not to do, and when you're holding the baton.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting that there used to be, as I'm sure we all are, if we don't personally remember, we've heard stories of how a lot of the old school conducting was it was not warm and fuzzy, and it's interesting how I don't think that creates the best music making. It's I was one of the main music director that I worked with while I was full time in the CPO was Hans Graf, and it was such a treat to get to work with him and learn from him on a regular basis. That one of the things I loved that he would always do, if in rehearsal something didn't go exactly the way he wanted, he'd stop and he'd think for a moment and he'd go, okay, let me try something different here. And we all knew what happened. We all knew what he wanted. And it was that he was, rather than going, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? That he's going, okay, we're all a part of this. What can I do to help? And that for me was one of the, and I feel like I got many great things from his conducting, but it created this atmosphere of the group of musicians on the stage as collaborators and people striving for the same goal, rather than the boss and the underlings. Right. And that, I think that's so crucial. And it's interesting because it's different when it's when you're the musicians, when the instrumentalists are also the students. It changes the role a little bit, but it's still, I think, extremely important to be collaborators up there. And that's one of the things that I find such a wonderful challenge about conducting, is the psychological aspect of it, is how to get the best out of a group of people rather than just a group of musicians or a piece of music. And that I found, like, when I talk about the various steep learning curves I've been through, and that was when I first started conducting the symphonic band at the U of C, which was the first group that I was fortunate enough to take over. I didn't want to be the bad guy,
Right.
and that doesn't work. That it was interesting because it's just, that's my natural approach to life, is I want to be people's friends. I enjoy just getting to know people, and it's I remembered about 3 or 4 weeks into my first year with them, there was one student who just wasn't doing the work, and I was just trying to be positive, trying to be encouraging, and it was about 3 or 4 weeks in, I looked around the stage and I saw a whole lot of frustrated faces. And that's when the penny dropped of going, oh yeah, okay, I can't be Mr. Nice Guy all the time, because I'm the only one who can actually solve this frustration for everybody else on stage. I've got to be the heavy hand. And I found my way to be comfortable playing that role. And I find it a very interesting balance of that, being collaborators and yet at the end of the day, that when you're on the podium, you're the person who can actually make the difference, and you're the one who has to address the things that are on everybody's mind.
And now, a word from our sponsor. You know, Cait, I often think back to my time at music camp and how important that time was not only in my growth as a musician, but as a person.
I feel the same way. My first time performing original music in front of a big audience was at a music camp, and many of the people I met at camp are still friends and colleagues of mine today.
2022 marks the 60th anniversary of the Interprovincial Music Camp. That's right, 60 years of being Canada's most comprehensive music camp.
IMC offers specialized camps for all levels of band, orchestra, choir, musical theater, rock, jazz, and songwriting. Students can learn from faculty that include members of major symphony orchestras, Juno and Grammy Award winners, touring musicians, and music educators. Also, new this year is IMC's Beginning Band Camp, open to campers ages 9 to 14.
Located at the beautiful Camp Manitou on Manitowobbing Lake, located in the heart of Muskoka Parry Sound region of Ontario, Canada, IMC facilities are second to none, with fully equipped cabins, outstanding meals with one of the chefs dedicated to preparing meals for those with specific dietary needs.
IMC is unique in that it is centered around music, but also offers a true camp experience, including traditional activities such as swimming, sailing, water skiing, beach volleyball, and much more, as well as evening programs for the campers each night after the faculty concert.
IMC provides young musicians with comprehensive and exceptional musical training, with faculty members who are some of Canada's finest performers and educators. Some of which include past bandroom guest, conductor, clinician, and educator Colin Clark, Dr. Colleen Richardson from Western University, Dominic Desautels, principal clarinet of the Canadian Opera Company, Sarah Jeffrey, principal oboe of the Toronto Symphony, and Vanessa Freilich, associate principal trombone of the Toronto Symphony. They all bring a wealth of teaching experience and performing skills and are passionate about sharing their love of music with young musicians.
Don't miss the opportunity to grow, be inspired, have fun, and make memories that will last a lifetime.
Stay connected by following them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at imc.ca. That's imc.ca. To learn more about how you or someone you know can celebrate 60 years of the Interprovincial Music Camp, visit campimc.ca. That's campimc.ca. I can imagine that, especially coming from the professional world. That I'm always thinking about it, working with like we have our top group here is the Chamber Winds, and they're just for the conductors to work with. And Jason's always talking about how we can, be more efficient. So I can imagine coming from the professional world, and usually conductors just using fewer words and showing more. And being direct when you have to be direct, and understanding that direct isn't some kind of code word for being a jerk, but
Right.
you do you're right. You have to. You can't be Mr. Nice Guy all the time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
very.
yeah. It was interesting with Hans Graf. He was very definitely not Mr. Nice Guy all the time, but it was always about the music. And that's where I was like, none of us on stage could go, well, that was personal. It's like, yeah,
Right.
okay. I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And that's, yeah, when it's done purely and simply about getting the best out of that, it works. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very thankful for the mute button because our audio-only listeners cannot tell at all that I'm coughing over here. YouTube people, you're on to me. Okay, so we wanted to know about how your time as a high-level professional musician has influenced your approach to working with students and community musicians, as well as other professional musicians. You've kind of talked about this already, just naturally in the conversation, but I'm also wondering, because you mentioned that you had a hard time with nerves as a performer. Did that happen for you as a conductor? Does that happen to you as an educator? And how does that help you relate to your students and your collaborators, having had that experience yourself?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I was just chatting with my conducting class this morning as they were kind of each conducting their first real excerpt of a real piece, and in various degrees of nerves and all of that. And I was telling them about the first time for me getting up there, like the baton was like this, and I was saying, it was interesting for me that dealing with the nerves in that setting, it was different for me than, because I had already worked through it in a different setting, and so it was much shorter lived. And it's funny. I find the biggest thing for nerves is just doing what you do a lot, and I found that, like, I used to just dread. I remember playing quintet gigs, and I'd be going, okay, yeah, I've got the first trumpet. I'll do it. Fine. Just somebody else talk. I just don't make me talk. And and then it was just over the last 15 years or whatever it's been of teaching that I've really grown to love that, because it's something that is just a daily part of my life, getting up and talking in front of people and communicating. And this is the same thing with conducting. But I do find that it's very much finding, when we try to do something the way we think we should, it will never be comfortable. When we when we find the way we do it, that's when the nerves and all of those things start to settle, because we're finding our home. Yeah. And it's interesting with the other part of your question about how how my role as a professional performer, and that affects my conducting and teaching. I've had a number of teachers where I'll go in and work with a junior high band or something like that. Number of teachers comment on how much they appreciated that I wasn't talking down to the students, or wasn't that I was talking about musical things, right from, and it's interesting, which for me, having that that background where it's primarily about being a performer, that was just a given, that there's what we do, whether we're picking up the instrument for the first time or we've been playing it professionally for 30 years, that we're still shooting for exactly the same target. We're just refining it more and more, and need different things to get there. And yeah, I find, for me, one of the areas that I've learned so much from other educators and people in that, especially people who have come through an education route, and as opposed to a primarily performing route, I've learned so much and continue to learn so much about how to approach things from that direction. And it's ultimately the combination of those two things that creates the best music making and the best educational experience, I think, too. Which and it's interesting that one thing that I notice there can be, and it seems like there's less and less a division of this, and I think it's, especially as composers are more and more interested for writing for both, but this division, which to me is a fictitious division between wind bands and orchestras, where it's music. we're musicians, and I don't classify myself as an orchestral musician or a band musician, or I'm a musician, and I love to have that expressed in all sorts of ways. And no matter how we're doing that, there are these absolute commonalities across the board. So it's what I can bring from my orchestral performing world to the band stuff, I find can be really helpful. And actually, I find it fascinating with the difference in a lot of how we learn as wind band conductors and versus orchestral conductors, and the different emphasis and the difference in technique and approaches, that there is so much more, so much less emphasis on strict clarity in the orchestral world. Right. Like I'm from certain extremes there. I remember working with a certain conductor where I actually had to lift my stand up high enough and keep my head down low enough where I wouldn't actually see him, so that I wouldn't get thrown off too much. And and I find that there's with the emphasis on the music making and the orchestral school of conducting, and the more of an emphasis on clarity in the band world of conducting. I love trying to get those two closer and closer. So I think both can learn a lot from the other.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was thinking Carl St. Clair was here last year, and it was working with the orchestra and with the band, and it was interesting because he started his life as a band conductor and study, and that's what his degree was in, and then but seeing him kind of work and do his kind of, like you said, maybe it's not as here is right. Where you play now. Seeing how everyone kind of stepped up for that, and how it really he made everyone come up to his level and have their ears turned on. So no, and I love, I'm the first person actually, I founded the Band Room podcast. I probably put more walls up between us than most.
No,
but it's so good to just always remind that music is music, no matter who you're making it with or what you're making it with. And
here's the thing, Dylan. I'm just thinking, because you said you started the band room. So in my high school, the band room and the strings room were attached to each other. There was, like those hotels room that have like doors, like adjoining rooms. So we had like an orchestra room, or at least another music room, right? They were both just music rooms, but one of them was typically where the band rehearsals happened, and the other was where the strings rehearsals happened. I think just so that they didn't have to keep swapping out setups over and over again, right? But they did kind of become these places where like the bandies went to this room and then the strings kids went to this room. But like, because they attached, there was a door in between, a lot of us floated back and forth. A lot of us played in both ensembles, and the conductors switched pretty frequently. And I don't know, I'm just reminded of that. Like when we here at the Band Room podcast, like I always imagine that it's the band room and all the other music rooms that are down the hall or on the other side of the door, or however it's configured in this metaphorical music room situation, right? But yeah, I'm so glad, Gareth, that you mentioned that, because there is, definitely in the world of composition, this divide of like, writing for one kind of realm and not another. And sometimes that is intentional. Sometimes it's just like the way that the system has kind of gone for so long that people don't know how to do it any other way. And I think these conversations are useful, because at the end of the day, we are all musicians, regardless of what we're doing. if you saw me scribbling something down, it's because I was trying to remember to mention the thing about nerves, because you talked about it earlier on in that answer. But I love that you mentioned that the nerves come when you're trying to do something the way you think you're supposed to do it. And that some of that resolves when you come into yourself, when you are doing something that feels genuine, or that comes naturally to you, or you're expressing yourself, you're using your own voice and not the voice you think you should be using, or however it applies. I think that applies so much, not only to performers and conductors, but I mean, for myself as a composer, I think about these things all the time. Like, is the resistance I'm facing, actually just that I'm trying to sound like something that's not me? Like we talk about these concepts a lot, and it's just, yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I hadn't considered that sometimes what we call performance anxiety, but could be conducting anxiety, composing anxiety, whatever it is, can emerge out of insincerity, or like doing something that you think you're supposed to do and not what you actually feel called to do. So I just wanted to thank you for highlighting that, because that's a cool perspective.
And now a word from our sponsor. It seems like almost every episode we talk about the importance of community. Often maybe our guests bring it up to why they became interested in band. Community is a big part of why many of us do what we do.
Absolutely, and that's why I love our new partnership with the Canadian Band Association, to share an opportunity for you to be part of a national community of band directors, musicians, and educators.
And becoming a member is easy. By joining your provincial band chapter, you automatically become a member of the Canadian Band Association.
No matter if you're in British Columbia, Newfoundland and Labrador, or anywhere in between, there is a band association for you.
Yes, even my homeland of Prince Edward Island. They started a new one, which is very exciting. Membership benefits include access to the Canadian Winds Journal, monthly e-news,
National Insurance Program, National Youth Band audition discounts for students, access to national awards and musician certificates.
not to mention all the great events your own provincial chapters will hold. Conducting workshops, community band events, reading sessions, workshops, and more.
Support band and music education in Canada through supporting the work being done by your local chapter.
To learn more about how you can become a member of the Canadian Band Association, visit canadianband.org/chapters to find info on how to connect with your provincial chapter. That's canadianband.org/chapters to learn how you can be part of the Canadian Band community.
Awesome.
Yeah. That was also one that jumped out to me, because I know how many people, even I just sent Cait something from a listener about hearing people like you talk about that. It's so impactful and important for people to hear. We're gonna pivot a little bit and talk about the University of Calgary. It's and once again, in Canada, it is a very well-known, especially a very well-known band program. I still listen to those Glenn Price recordings, and I'm Mark Hopkins is one of my mentors. So I was wondering if you could just take some time to maybe talk about the University of Calgary program, maybe some highlights from your time there, and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's great that when I was starting there, I was both Glenn and Mark were there as well, and it's and it's with both of them, like it's Mark continues to do such great work and is a good friend, and what I worked with him. I was in his conducting classes. I was starting out, and he was wonderful.
Sounds like a full circle moment.
Indeed, And Glenn, what he's the renown that he brought to the recordings of the wind ensemble and all of that. It can at times be a daunting thing to kind of think, okay, stepping into those shoes. Right. So yeah, again, I feel very, very fortunate to that things have worked out the way they have, and I'm able to be doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I work with, as I mentioned, I work with the symphonic band, and then I also work with the wind ensemble and the brass choir. So those are the three ensembles that I teach at the university, and it's really, I find it a very intriguing thing that I was very nervous about the beginning of this year, as I'm sure a lot of directors were, about going, okay, what's going to happen after these last 2.5 years, and what are things going to look like with incoming students and all of that. And it has just been such a it's been better than I hoped for. It's been better than I thought was possible. So we've been very lucky from that perspective so far. And yeah, there are many things over the years. I've been working with the symphonic band for 15 years now, and the wind ensemble for 8 years, something like that, maybe 10. And both of them, they're both very, very gratifying to work with in their different ways. With the wind ensemble, with tours and that sort of thing, it's there's this degree of getting to know these advanced students who are, a lot of them, planning to go forward in different aspects of music, whether it's education or performance, and getting to know them at that stage in their process as musicians, and having seen them come in as first years and trying to figure out which end was up, and that with the symphonic band being able to trying to like that's the symphonic band is largely there are quite a few first year students in there, and quite a few non-majors, and it's a very it's a different road to get to that same ultimate goal, a different stage in the road, so that slightly different approach to things of figuring out what needs to be what needs to be made more clear, and what to emphasize. And it's funny, I think about my highlights at the university, and it all comes back to those moments, honestly. There have been wonderful performance moments, touring, all this sort of stuff, but honestly it's the light bulb moments, both for me and for my students, that they're some of them very humbling, of understanding that, okay, actually I'm having things that I'm communicating to the group, or to players, that I didn't realize I was communicating, I didn't want to communicate, and just that the humbling experience of that process of self-awareness. And yeah, it's funny. I can look at a number of number of situations, both at U of C and elsewhere, that those are the real highlights for me. The individual things with students, having a student early on in my conducting class experience come up to me after class and just basically go, it looks like you don't like me. It looks like you're, and I'm just going, like, I was shattered, because I was just going like, holy cow, what am I doing that's giving that off? And it was just that awareness that I would allow myself to get distracted and forget that, okay, yeah, no, the students are looking at me and they're looking at me, look at them. And what I'm showing on my face hugely matters. Whether it's intended towards them or not, or whether it has anything to do with the situation. And it was great, because that, from that moment on, we had a really it was just a really positive association, that they became one of my favorite players in my ensembles, and they really thrive. And it's moments like that are the real highlights for me. That as I say, those light bulb, those eye-opening moments, that those are the times that I go, I'm doing the right thing. I am in the right field. And I spent some time not doing the right. When I first had my injury, I was panicking, going, okay, what am I going to do to make a living? I don't think music's going to. I became a financial planner. I'm a certified financial planner.
No way.
And yeah, no way. And I made more money as a half-assed conductor in that first half year than I did as a financial. That's what I kind of went, okay, yeah, no, I get it. I should be in music. But it's those light bulb moments that are the reinforcement of that process and that realization that
that you made the right call.
Belong in music. Yeah.
I must say, for some reason during this question, or during your answer, my internet would keep like kind of cutting out, and I would miss very large chunks of what you were saying. And then I'd come back in and there was laughter, and I was like, oh, no, what did I miss?
You'll hear it all in post.
Yeah, I'll hear it in post. Well, no,
okay.
And
I have to ask about the financials. Do you still do any of that? Like, did you completely leave that behind, or like have you
completely left that behind? It was, and it's funny. Like I always enjoy the challenge of learning something new and relating to people and helping people, and I don't enjoy the challenge of trying to sell people stuff. And I realized that was a lot of what that was, and I realized that's not a real forte for me. So back to music.
Well, glad you figured that out early on. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Did you want to speak about your role with the Alberta Winds? Because I know we didn't explicitly ask about that at all, but we definitely love to, create some space to hear about that aspect of your life too, if you want to share.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Alberta Winds is a group that it's young professionals, some educators, but various levels of professional musicians playing in there, who come in and play for the love of playing. And our goal is to have it be a paid ensemble, and we're getting a little bit of that this year, which is really nice. After a couple down years, that we're starting to be able to get a little taste of that goal and direction. But we run it more like a professional ensemble, where we do 3 concerts a year, and we just have 4 rehearsals leading up to that concert. We'll have a rehearsal about 10 days to 2 weeks before, and then 3 concerts during the week of the concert, or 3 rehearsals during the week of the concert. And I have so much fun with that group. I'm conducting a lot of colleagues, and a lot of people that I really very, very much I consider my job on the podium, getting to direct things and call some shots, as a very privileged one in that ensemble. It's it's a wonderful group to work with, and just it's fun to have that approach to music making, of that professional level approach, not just with the wonderful level of the players, but with that rehearsal schedule. I enjoy that the little bit of pressure that goes with that, and that the intensity of that week when we get together for that time every 3 times a year. It's a very different dynamic from the other groups that I conduct, and I love that change and breaking things up. That's one thing I've very much learned about myself, is I like different things. That it's that's where I love having the foot in the orchestral world, the foot in the band world, and one foot on the podium, one foot back in the trumpet section, and I love the challenges that come with wearing a lot of different hats.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's I love the idea of you being able to conduct your colleagues, but the idea of us as music directors still being able to learn from our players. And I know, and it's sometimes a humbling experience, but I know how beautiful it is, and it's great to have a group like that in Alberta to show what is possible, and what high level music can sound like. I wish there was more of these groups. But
Me too.
No, it's great stuff.
I know, because it's somewhere in the realm of like community band, but you've kind of taken it up a notch in that you are, advocating for it to be a paid musical opportunity for the players, and also, like you said, the approach of like, the more intense kind of rehearsal concert cycle stuff, as opposed to a more relaxed community band that meets once a week all year long, and you take a really long time to kind of casually prep your repertoire and stuff, right? So I wish there were more ensembles like that. I would join one, I think, if there was, like that's the kind of thing we need more of, for sure.
If I move back, Cait, if I move back,
do it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Gotta tell more people to retire first. I won't say who. Anyway, okay. I digress.
And I wanted to mention too that we never crossed paths with the National Youth Band, but we came close, because I think, was it 2014 that you did?
That's right.
Did
Yeah.
NYB? Yeah. I played in that ensemble from 2008 to like 11 or something. So we just didn't line up.
That's very cool. That's too bad we didn't cross paths.
Yeah, I know. But we have now, so that's good.
There we go.
So we have sadly come to our final question of this conversation, which has just been delightful so far. And before we get to the final question, I'm just going to remind our listeners that the 3 of us are going to go off into bonus episode land and record a fun bonus episode for our Patreon community. We do not know the topic, but I think maybe Gareth has some fun stories for us, and we're really excited about that. So if you would like to check that out and also access all of the other wonderful back catalog of bonus episodes, you can do that at patreon.com/bandroompod. Okay. So you've given us lots to think about throughout this conversation already, but our final question is, what advice do you have for conductors or just musicians in general?
It's interesting because there's so much. There's so much, but it's and yet it's so simple at the same time. It's understanding what is core and never letting go of that. Understanding as a conductor, understanding what are the absolutely core elements to getting the sound that you want and that best sound that a group can make. What are the core elements of that for that ensemble, and never letting go of that. And it's the same thing as us as instrumentalists, that understanding that it's those core things. And actually, I get back to Cichewicz's teaching, that he was very much about fundamentals, and doesn't matter how, if you're preparing Brandenburg 2 or some other killer piece, it would a very small amount of your practice time would be spent doing that, and it was about fundamentals and about those core things. And it's letting that guide us all the time, whether it's about our individual music making or our guiding an ensemble. And we find that by our own trial and error. Starting out, I think it's really confusing and nerve-wracking trying to find your way, your voice, your approach, and having the courage to do that not trying to be a clone of anybody else. We learn so much from everybody else. And then we take that and we internalize that, and we find how we express that. And that's what makes great music. That's what makes that's why performances, that's why acoustic instruments, that's why that kind of communication will never disappear, because it's about this absolutely intimate expression and connection of what is innermost in each of us. And when we accept nothing less than that, that always leads us in the right direction.
Wow. There's been so many times during this whole conversation, like basically after every answer you've given, I've wanted to go, if more people thought like that, the world would be a much better place. And it has just been, no, and I mean it. It's just, and I've only been able to hear great things about you, Gareth, and to actually be able to have this conversation with you today has just made those cement even more everything that everyone said about you. It's so refreshing to hear such a wonderful musician talk about the importance of people and the importance of that person that's in front of you, and how what we do, what we say, how we play influences all of those things. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here in the band room.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real treat chatting with both of you.
Thanks so much for spending time with us in the band room. If you want to learn more about anything we discussed in today's episode, check out the links found on our website, bandroompod.com.
If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe to the Band Room Podcast, give us a rating and a review, and tell all your friends about how much you enjoyed it.
If you really love the show, maybe you should consider becoming part of our Patreon community, where you can support BRP and get some extra incentives in return. Or you can buy some sweet, sweet BRP merch, helping to offset podcast hosting costs and investments into new equipment, so that we can continue to bring you great content and great people.
Follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to keep up with what's on the go. If you have any thoughts on today's episode, leave us a comment on our website, bandroompod.com, where your comment might be featured on a future episode of BRP. Our theme music is Skyline, composed by EKR Hamill and performed by Dr. Gillian MacKay and the University of Toronto Wind Ensemble.
Stay safe and be well, bandies. Thanks again for stopping by the Band Room.